Hey everyone, this is Allan Matudio, creator of Kasama, and you're listening to the True North County Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Allan Matudio about his graphic novel Kasama at the 2022 Montreal Comic Arts Festival. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Allan was born in Montreal to Filipino parents. He's a visual artist, writer, and organizer who worked in nanochemistry and analytical chemistry following his graduation with a master's degree in chemical engineering. His interest in art drew him back to art school that eventually led to his day job with a video game company. Allan's latest book is Kasama. The story of Kasama is described as follows. A dark force has been increasingly manifesting itself after centuries of deep rooting within the prosperous soils of the archipelago known as the Philippines. Kia and Allison are unlikely allies who arrive at the bustling city of Orchideas, unaware that they will soon face one of the most notorious creatures to have ever oppressed the islands. Kasama draws upon Allan's experiences as a tourist in his homeland, as a community volunteer in the diaspora, and as a student relearning his heritage. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Allan Matudio about his graphic novel Kasama at the 2022 Montreal Comic Arts Festival. So, Allan Matudio, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time. What I usually do to start off the conversation is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I wonder if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
Man, this is crazy because, as a kid, you don't really you see a comic book and you're just kind of obsessed with it, right? It could be anything. But the first comics that I really started collecting was Sonic the Hedgehog from Archie.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's been a while. From what I know, they're not with Archie anymore, but it's still nice to see them on the stand sometimes,
Yeah, and now it's they got a sequel movie out the movie theater.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk that? Well, it was an animated show, I think, at one point, right? So it did cross over to TV. Great inspirations when you're a youngster, but I'm wondering who or what inspires you to create today?
Apart from obviously the biggest sources of inspiration are probably the other Filipino artists. Ever since I met them, that's when I started really connecting with the themes of these comic books or graphic novels, right? So at least when it comes to the subject matter, I love reading other Filipino creatives. In terms of just maybe more popular comics, I really like reading Rick Remender or just art from Wes Craig. Yeah. More specifically, Deadly Class, that really inspired me in terms of the use of color and just panel composition. It was really inspiring and I find innovative,
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of good stuff there for sure. Well, you're an exhibitor this year at the Montreal Comic Arts Festival. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, do you have any past favorite convention or festival moments that you could share?
Yeah, to be honest, this whole thing is fairly new for me because as much as I enjoyed comics, Kasama was basically my first, right? And I've always attended comic book festivals for fun or just visiting. But ultimately, it's all fairly new. Maybe it's been 3-4 years only. And really, one of the most exciting things was just discovering it and seeing the volume of indie comics, at least within Montreal, because for the longest time, I didn't even know this community existed.
Ah, right. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Now, you hinted at the next question I'm going to have, which is the book that you'll be showcasing at the festival, and I presume that's your new graphic novel, Kasama. So I'm wondering if you could talk a wee bit about the story and what inspired you to create it.
So I'm definitely going to be sharing Kasama. I'm also going to have my zine present called Michael. But in terms of Kasama, Kasama's the story of two travelers kind of navigating their cultural differences as they hunt down one of the most notorious creatures in the Philippines called the Manananggal. Really, it's a story that was inspired by me connecting back to my Filipino heritage. Before writing this comic, I was kind of going through like a personal kind of research or discovery. And I wanted to communicate what I learned through a medium I was comfortable with. And I loved writing and I liked drawing. So writing a graphic novel was what came the most natural for me.
Sure. Well, what response have you received thus far, if you've shown it to anyone? What sort of feedback have you got?
So, wow, actually, it's been a year now. It's the 1 year anniversary of Kasama. And overall, at least amongst my Filipino peers, the reception has been overwhelmingly positive because
that's great.
Yeah, they don't really see this type of content, or at least content that isn't just romanticizing the culture. So apart from just reading about my heritage, I'm also someone who volunteers within the community, and because of this stuff, like I get a different perspective and I get to communicate that through the graphic novel. In terms of like just other people outside the Filipino community, the response has been a lot of, well, they're just happy to discover this, to learn more about just the Philippines in general. So it's a great introduction for them.
Right. Is it too much to assume that you feel like you're giving back something to the community in the creation of this book?
Yeah, like because a big part of it is what I've learned from just personal research or reconnecting with my roots and stuff. So yeah, like I wouldn't have gotten to this point without other Filipino artists or other like community organizers. So this is my way of like sharing what we do and like what's beautiful about the Philippines, and also like what's, kind of bad or complicated. So
right. Okay.
Kind of sharing all of that, right?
Sure, absolutely. I understand completely. That's great. Good stuff. Well, I want to switch gears a wee bit and talk about the tools you use to create your art. I wonder if you could walk me through your workflow.
Sure. So I took a comic book making class actually from this studio called, it's a small kind of art studio in Montreal called Sin Studio actually. And the teacher was Sal Goodsam. I don't know if you've heard of him. But he's a pretty big indie artist here in Montreal. I basically started drawing every panel in a card, which is funny. So I have like something like 500 cue cards, and each one represented a different comic book panel. And I would organize these panels to suggest page composition before actually jumping into drawing the page out. So for the most part, I made like at least the groundwork was in pencil and paper. Once I've drawn it in pencil, I would scan it and then start doing the inking. And then once I have the inking, again, this is on paper and this time actual ink, right? And then I would bring it again into Photoshop to get it colored. So it was a lengthy process. Very kind of old school process too, I guess, for like doing at least 2/3 of it, not digitally.
So was there a story that you had in mind, or you were just taking like segments that you found, okay, this is interesting vignette, and then I'll piece it together with another? Is that how it worked out?
That's exactly kind of how it started, right? So I would experience something in the Philippines and be like, oh, okay, I want to write this down somewhere. And I was able to kind of create a little scene about it maybe. And at one point I have all these different scenes and kind of found something to tie it all together. With refinement and several just reiterations of things, it turned into just a complete story. So definitely, yeah.
Now, how did you get the book published? Was it through Kickstarter or did you go to a publisher? How did you get that done?
Yeah, so I basically finished the project before pitching it to different publishers. And I basically looked for publishers that had the same themes or just general content. I ended up picking a publisher that focuses on Filipino artists based in Winnipeg. And when I sent them Kasama, they instantly loved it. And to me, that was great because I felt like I didn't need to justify the work. It was the first publisher that just kind of loved it and accepted it. And yeah, again, it's nice to not need to defend the stuff that I'm doing or not need to explain why this is important because, we just vibe the same way.
Yeah, it's great to get that recognition. That's amazing that you're able to do that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure. I was recently looking at your Instagram feed that you took part in the 2022 Filipino Canadian Comic Symposium. I wonder if you could talk a wee bit more about that and what was it all about?
Yeah, it was kind of a gathering of Filipinos who are involved in the comic book industry. So we were around 6 artists. Most of us actually were indie, but it was a collection of storytellers as well as illustrators. And yeah, it was great to be able to see other Filipino artists doing the same work as I do. It's also kind of crazy to realize how there's so little of us, especially those who make Filipino content, because there are obviously Filipino comic book artists, but it's very rare to have them create content that has to do with Filipino culture or Filipino experiences. So that was the first, actually. Hopefully we get to, expand on that, and hopefully that symposium just allow for the community to grow or for other Filipino artists to see that we do exist and, just be able to connect.
Yeah, so now you've got a network of colleagues, I guess, you can reach out to. Totally. Was there any sort of call to action when it was all said and done? Was it to, other than just meeting again next year, were there any sort of action things that you all agreed that it could be done over the course of the year?
I think there was a potential for a paper or some kind of collab afterwards. It kind of, I don't know, at least for me, it kind of got lost because there's a lot happening again. Things started picking up again, right? Like I don't know how. It seems like the pandemic is kind of dying down, like who knows, but there are a lot more events in the summer. Like I'm really blessed to be having back-to-back events for Kasama, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, that's
so good. There was a plan to kind of compile or even just create a short of comic strips, but there's just a lot happening, and I don't know how. It's one of those things that you just it'd be great if we could do that, right? But maybe nothing really.
Well, we'll see over the course of the year what will happen. I'm sure it's great things will come of it. That's for sure.
Yeah, to be honest, it was just great that it existed and connected.
Absolutely.
Other Filipino creatives together.
Yeah. So we've talked about Kasama, and you will have a zine at Montreal Comic Arts Festival. But I'm wondering, do you have any other up-and-coming projects that you can talk about?
So there's the zine, and the zine is going to be about, more specifically, my Filipino Montreal experience. So Kasama, the graphic novel, is more about, it's fiction. It's fantastical, right? But the zine is going to be a mix of just writing and illustrations about different experiences growing up Filipino in Montreal. So that I'm pretty excited about because it's, again, one of those things that you don't really see much of, even in just the Asian community in general. Other than that, I'm always illustrating, always trying to collab, trying to discover new mediums of storytelling, trying to get into screen printing and jewelry, actually. So I don't know, I'm just dabbling into a bunch of different things.
Sure. And I guess being at the Montreal Comic Arts Festival, you get to rub shoulders with other creative people, maybe other ideas you could share, perhaps.
Yeah. So it's always nice to see the different faces that attend these things. And it's so nice to be invited because, I've attended it maybe 2 or 3 times in the past, and I was in awe that such a community existed. And like I always told myself that, man, it'd be so cool to be able to table. And at the time, I didn't even have a project, right? It was just like, man, it would be so cool to have a table. Got to figure out a project. Uh,
And there you go.
So yeah, and it's
You made it
happening.
happen. That's
Yeah,
great.
and I was saying how I have other events coming up, and the other one is the Toronto one, right? Like,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just
TGAF.
going to ask you that. What other events you'll be attending? So TGAF is your next one for sure.
Yeah, so there's TCAF where we're trying to set up a few exhibits here and there, again, because things are opening up again. Like there's a lot of opportunity. And yeah, I did the mini Comic-Con Montreal in December. I told myself I'll do it at least once for the big one, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a different demographic, but I told myself I'll do it at least once because yeah, like I'll do it for the culture, you know.
Right. Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
different level of exhaustion, you know.
Well, you just never know who you might influence. See, that's the other thing too, right? There might be someone saying there's always a reader out there for your book, and you're just finding the right one. So the great opportunity.
Yeah, that makes all the difference. To be honest, like
for sure. Well, with all the projects and events you have on the go, is there a website where you recommend people go to find out more about your current and your future projects?
To be honest, like these days, my Instagram has been the best way to just follow what I've been doing, follow me and the different mediums I'm testing out. So that Instagram is at Allan Mima, ALLANMIMA.
Very good. Well, Allan, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview?
Yeah, I guess one thing I do try to highlight in opportunities like this is that I also do a lot of community work. And with the stuff that I create, I try, like I mentioned earlier, I try to give back. In fact, with Kasama specifically, I don't make a profit at all from the book. All of it is going to nonprofit orgs or a charity. Well, it's going to two different places. So half of it is going to the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal, and the other half is going to the Save Our Students Network in the Philippines.
Wow, that's really commendable for sure. That's good stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm just like, yeah, it'd be nice to give back, and like it feels like it's unfair because I learned from kind of situations that impact certain communities, and like this is all I know to do, right? All I know to do is to draw, to illustrate, to tell stories, and like I'm not the type of person who is who's at the front lines yelling or helping, or because like I'm more of a timid person, but like I can, I think I know how to draw, or so whatever I get from drawing, I try to give back.
Thanks to Allan for the chat. You can discover more about Allan on Instagram at ALLANMIMA. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2022.